History is a stage for the clash of titans, of armies, of ideologies, of kings. But the greatest duel ever fought was not waged with swords and chariots. It was a war of wills, a conflict fought not for land or for gold, but for the very soul of a nation, and for the answer to a single, eternal question: who truly holds dominion over the world? On one side stood an empire at the zenith of its power, Egypt, a civilization forged in gold, built by the sweat of 1,000,000 slaves, and ruled by a man who was not just a king, but a god on earth. Pharaoh, his power was absolute. His armies were invincible. His monuments scraped the heavens, a testament to a glory that seemed eternal. His was the power of the seen, the tangible, the material, the power of the fist. On the other side stood a lone man, a shepherd, an exile, a murderer with a haunted past and a stammering tongue, a man with no army, no wealth, no earthly authority. His name was Moses, and he carried only one weapon: a message, a command from a God that no one could see, a God of slaves. And so the stage was set for the greatest duel in human history, a duel between a prophet and an empire, between the God of Egypt and the God of Abraham. This is the story of the 10 plagues, a story of escalating, terrifying, and awe-inspiring power, a divine drama where the very forces of nature were bent to answer one man's prayer and to break the will of another. It began, as all great conflicts do, with a simple, audacious demand. Moses stood before the throne of the most powerful man on the planet, a simple wooden staff in his hand, and spoke the words that would unleash the storm. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go." Pharaoh, in his arrogance, laughed. "Who is this Lord, that I should obey his voice? My gods are the ones of stone and gold, the ones whose temples tower over this land. My power is the one that commands the armies, that owns the very people you speak of." And his answer was a declaration of war. "I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." With that refusal, the first seal was broken. The duel had begun, and the first battle would be fought in the lifeblood of Egypt itself, the Nile. Moses lifted his staff, and the great river, the source of all of Egypt's wealth and life, turned to blood. The water became a foul, undrinkable tide of death. The fish died, the land stank, and the people of the empire dug desperately in the earth for a single drop of clean water. For 7 days, the river of blood flowed, a gruesome testament to a power Pharaoh could not comprehend. Yet his heart was hardened. His magicians, with their dark arts, could replicate the trick on a smaller scale. And in the pride of his own limited power, he dismissed the miracle. He refused to see the warning. He refused to bend. This is the nature of the hardened heart. It sees evidence, but it denies the truth. It witnesses a power greater than its own, but its pride will not allow it to concede. And so, the second plague was unleashed. Frogs, not a few, but a living, breathing, croaking tide of them. They swarmed from the bloodied river, covering the land, invading every home, every palace, every chamber of the king himself. An empire that had built monuments to the sky was now brought to its knees by the most humble of creatures. The plague was not just a physical affliction. It was a psychological humiliation, a demonstration that the God of the slaves could turn the very symbols of life and nature against the oppressor. Pharaoh, suffocating in the relentless presence of the plague, relented. He called for Moses. He begged, "Plead with the Lord to take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go." He made a promise in his moment of desperation. But the moment the plague was lifted, the moment the pressure was relieved, the arrogance returned. He hardened his heart once more. And this is a question we must all ask ourselves. How many of us make promises to a higher power in our moments of crisis, only to forget them the moment the storm passes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Pharaoh's refusal set the stage for a new, more intimate, and more irritating escalation. The third plague. The dust of the earth itself rose up, becoming a cloud of gnats, a torment that clung to man and beast. Unlike the previous plagues, This was one that Pharaoh's own magicians could not replicate. In their failure, they delivered a chilling warning to their king. This is the finger of God. But even the warning of his own experts, his own priests of the dark arts, was not enough. The heart of a king who believes himself to be a god is a fortress of pride, deaf to all reason. Pharaoh's mind was a closed system. He had seen power, but he refused to acknowledge a power greater than his own. And so, the duel escalated. The warnings became judgments. The fourth plague was a demonstration of divine precision. A thick, buzzing swarm of flies descended upon Egypt. They filled the houses, they covered the ground, they swarmed in the very palace of Pharaoh. A suffocating, relentless tide of filth and disease. But this was no random act of nature. For in the land of Goshen, where the Hebrew slaves lived, there were no flies. Not one. For the first time, a clear line was drawn in the sand. A visible, undeniable separation between the people of Pharaoh and the people of God. The plagues were no longer just a display of power. They were a targeted strike. The God of the slaves was demonstrating that he was not just a force of nature, but a sovereign king who knew his own people, who could protect them in the very heart of their enemy's territory. Once again, Pharaoh summoned Moses. Once again, he bargained. He offered a compromise, a politician's deal in the face of a divine command. Sacrifice to your God, but do it here in this land. But the prophet could not be swayed. A divine command is not a negotiation. It is an absolute. Moses refused. And once again, when the plague was lifted, Pharaoh's promise turned to dust. His heart remained a stone. And so the hand of God moved from the air to the earth, from the homes of the Egyptians to the very source of their wealth, their livestock. A terrible pestilence swept through the fields of Egypt. The horses that pulled their chariots of war, the donkeys that carried their goods, the cattle, the sheep, the camels, all of them fell. The entire economic foundation of the empire was decimated in a single, swift blow. And yet again, the divine separation was made clear. In the land of Goshen, not a single animal of the Israelites died. The message was now inescapable. This was not a series of unfortunate events. This was a systematic dismantling of an empire, a deconstruction of a false god's power, piece by piece. Pharaoh sent his own officials to verify the news. They returned, their faces pale, confirming the truth. The livestock of the Hebrews were untouched, and still he would not yield. The plagues now turned from the possessions of the Egyptians to their own bodies. The sixth judgment was a plague of boils. From the soot of a furnace, a fine dust settled over all of Egypt, and on man and beast, it erupted into festering, agonizing sores. The pain was personal, inescapable. It was a humiliation written on their very skin. And for the first time, the magicians of Egypt were utterly defeated, unable even to stand before Moses, for they too were covered in the tormenting plague. Their dark power was broken. Their counsel was silenced. The duel was now between two figures alone, the prophet of the unseen God and the God-king of a dying empire, whose own body was now afflicted with the very judgment he refused to acknowledge. Every source of his pride, his power, and his comfort was being systematically stripped away. His river was blood. His homes were filled with pests. His wealth was dead in the fields. His own body was in agony. The empire was being unmade. And still, his heart, a fortress of pure, defiant pride, would not break. And so, God spoke to Moses once more to announce a plague unlike any that had come before. A judgment not from the earth, not from the water, but from the heavens themselves. Moses stood before Pharaoh, his face grim, and delivered the ultimatum. A storm of fire and ice, a cataclysm that would shatter every tree, every crop, every living thing left in the fields of Egypt. A final, terrifying demonstration of absolute power over the very sky that Pharaoh's gods claimed to rule. And Pharaoh's own servants, their faces filled with terror, pleaded with their king. Do you not yet understand that Egypt is destroyed? But Pharaoh's pride was a black hole, consuming all light, all reason. He offered another weak compromise, and when Moses refused, his heart was hardened once more a final act of defiance against the heavens. And so, the sky itself became the weapon. A storm unlike any in the history of Egypt descended upon the land. Not just hail, but hail mingled with fire, a terrifying, supernatural cataclysm that rained down from a blackened sky. It shattered every tree, flattened every crop, and struck down man and beast who were not sheltered. It was a demonstration of absolute cosmic power. And in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, there was only peace. The sun shone. Not a single hailstone fell. This time, Pharaoh's confession seemed real. He summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned this time. The Lord is in the right, and I, my people, are in the wrong." He begged for the storm to cease, and he promised he would let the people go. But the moment the thunder fell silent, the moment the sky cleared, the pride, like a resilient weed, grew back in the garden of his mind. The moment the pressure was gone, so was the promise. He broke his word. The duel was nearing its end. What the fire from the sky did not destroy, the eighth plague would consume. An east wind blew, and with it came a tide of locusts, a living, chewing carpet that covered the face of the earth until the ground itself was black with them. They devoured every green thing that the hail had left. Every leaf, every stalk of grain, every blade of grass. When they were finished, the once fertile jewel of the Nile was a barren, brown, and desolate wasteland. And still, Pharaoh's heart would not break. And so came the ninth plague, the most terrifying of all, a darkness, not the simple darkness of night, but a thick, heavy, and tangible darkness that could be felt. For 3 days, a supernatural blackness smothered the land of Egypt. No one could see their neighbor. No one could leave their place. It was a sensory deprivation on a national scale, a psychological torment, a chilling reminder of the void. And in the homes of the Israelites, there was light. This was the final warning, the final separation between a nation blessed by God and a nation cursed by its own stubborn king. After 3 days of absolute darkness, Pharaoh summoned Moses in a rage. He offered one last, insulting compromise, refusing to let the Israelites take their livestock. And when Moses refused, Pharaoh's pride turned to violent fury. He threatened the prophet with death. "Get away from me. Take heed to yourself, and see my face no more. For in the day you see my face, you shall die." And Moses, his face filled with a solemn, sorrowful gravity, spoke the final words of the duel. "You have spoken well. I will see your face no more." The final judgment was now set. The 10th and most terrible plague, the death of every firstborn in the land of Egypt. Moses delivered the instructions to his people. The Passover, every Hebrew family was to take a perfect lamb, to sacrifice it, and to mark the doorposts of their homes with its blood. It was to be a sign of faith, a sign of obedience. For that night, the Lord himself would pass through Egypt, and when he saw the blood, he would pass over that house, and the destroyer would not be permitted to enter. And so it was, as midnight fell over the land of Egypt, a great and terrible cry arose, a cry of anguish, of heartbreak, of loss, that echoed from every single Egyptian home. From the palace of Pharaoh, whose own firstborn son and heir lay dead, to the dungeon of the lowliest prisoner, there was not a house where someone was not dead. The empire was broken. The spirit of Egypt was shattered, and the heart of the God King, that fortress of pride, was finally, irrevocably crushed. In the dead of night, a frantic Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. The duel was over. There were no more bargains, no more compromises, no more threats. There was only the desperate plea of a defeated king. "Rise up, go out from among my people. Go, serve the Lord as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone." And he added, in a final, stunning admission of defeat, "Bless me also." And so, after 430 years of bondage, the people of Israel walked out of Egypt, not as fleeing slaves, but as a victorious army, laden with the gold and silver of the very empire that had enslaved them. The prophet had won. The unseen god of slaves had triumphed over the golden gods of the most powerful empire on earth.